I hope that one day God will forgive me. I tried with all my strength to fight these feelings which prevented me from achieving my religious goals, but nothing helped. My name is Timothy. I am a young priest of 32 years old. Very early in my childhood, I knew that my vocation was to lead the flock of God. Before we continue with the story, do not forget to click on the notification button in order to get notified at every new video posted. Thank you. All of this was passed on to me by my mom before her death, who took me to every prayer session she attended at church. In addition, she occupied a post of catechist, which made our religious activities even more intense at home. I was already in contact with biblical works and the Word of God even in the most banal occasions. Therefore, my career choice was only obvious. More, life had imposed on me so much personal test that to a certain point, there was only faith to be able to keep me upright. Indeed, I was born with a genetic modification, which makes my skin much paler than normal. Yes, you understood me. I am an albino. Throughout my childhood until my adolescence, I was a victim of a lot of mockery, misplaced jokes coming from ignorant relatives, but also from strangers who knew absolutely nothing about me. So it's nothing to say that my faith was my bulwark while I suffered all these moral pressures due to my difference. Moreover, the coup de grace was the death of my mother in a car accident, which was fatal to her. Mom had left, leaving me alone with my father, who was always on a mission due to his profession. As I grew up, I deepened this faith that animated me to the point of rubbing shoulders with the clergy of my hometown, and over the years, I ended up becoming one of their protégés. During my stay in high school, I ended up joining the priest's house that I frequented. It's true that I didn't particularly need financial help from them, but the fact of being around such a purified and pious environment reinforced the conviction in me, which was of becoming a priest in my turn. So I also immersed myself in the routine of life, which consisted of prayers, spreading the gospel, and helping those in need. I also had the opportunity to be close to my spiritual father, in whom I confided whenever I had concerns that were likely to shake my mental balance. And for once during my teenage, these little weekly talks were beneficial. I was able to finish my secondary studies without major difficulty, and one thing led to another. I received a scholarship from my diocese as an aspiring priest. At university, I studied psychology in preparation for my entry into a seminary, where I was going to deepen my knowledge in theology. It was during these university years that my tribulations began. I fell in love with a classmate with whom I was supposed to give a presentation. Philippa was her name. She was tall, caramel-skinned, with big brown eyes and a thin nose like Greek sculptures. But her appearance was not the only thing that attracted me to Philippa. She was sweet, intelligent, and above all, sensitive to others. She was the first girl who hadn't felt uncomfortable around me because of the color of my skin. You should already know that in Africa, there are a lot of prejudice about people with albinism, which make people likely to be afraid when they come across one. But Philippa was different. She didn't hesitate to hold my hand when she felt like it. She spread good mood and kindness around her every time we were together. It was totally incredible. The concern was that my feelings for my sweet friend were not aligned with my life choices. My aspiration was to become a priest, and priests all took a vow of chastity for the benefit of putting God's will into practice. It hurt me to have to miss this opportunity to know love, but with the help of my spiritual father, with whom I spoke regularly on the phone, I was able to question myself little by little. In order to not harm our friendship, I had to gradually create new passions so as not to rub shoulders with her too much. And every time she wanted us to hang around, I apologized by telling her that I already had something planned. It was difficult, but over time, I managed to create a kind of healthy distance between her and I. 2 years later, we ended up obtaining our bachelor's degrees. Philippa had to take off for France, where she hoped to obtain a doctorate degree which would allow her to practice the profession of psychologist. As for me, I entered the seminary where I studied theology, ethics, and even exorcism in order to come out with the necessary qualifications to move on to the next stage. I was able to refocus on what was essential in relation to my spiritual evolution. During those days, I also made trips through African countries as a volunteer. These trips helped me build compassion, benevolence, and love for my neighbor without expecting anything in return. All of these experiences would help me experience the love of Christ. I had great adventures with people I would have never hoped to meet. I had wonderful discoveries, unforgettable encounters, and an incomparable life lesson. Everything was going on wonderfully well until my parish, through Father Matthias, told me that it was time to complete my final stage of training as a priest in Rome. It was rather good news, so I set about preparing my stuff and my mind for this other step, which was just as important. A month later, I dropped off my suitcase in Italy. It was both fascinating and intimidating at the same time. I discovered a culture totally different from mine. I had trouble with the climate, which was rather cold compared to what I knew in Africa. I also had trouble with the culinary differences that existed between Italy and my country of origin. I used to eat typical African dishes, and there I had to conform to something totally different, which prompted the priest of my parish to introduce me to a restaurant in the city center of Rome, which served typical homegrown food. I immediately subscribed to it and went there every afternoon at 1 p.m. to have lunch. This is how, during one of my famous typical African lunches, I came across her again, Philippa. She was sitting at the other end of the room with her ndole dish with prawns. She didn't change. She was still so pretty, looking so calm and serene. I couldn't resist going to join her at her table. The reunion was so joyful. She was absolutely happy to see me again. She made me understand that she had been living in Rome for about 2 years and that she had finally been able to launch her career as a psychiatrist. We stayed there talking for a little more than 2 hours, reminiscing about university memories. Around 3:30 p.m., I had to go back to my parish since it was time to prepare for the 6 p.m. Mass. Before leaving, I gave her my phone number so that we could keep in touch since we now lived in the same city. I left there with a smile from ear to ear. I had finally found the person who made me feel the most emotions, after my mother, of course. During the weeks that followed, we called each other every single day, talked about anything and everything. Every 2 days, we also met at our favorite African restaurant around the Good Dish. Deep down inside, I knew that having met her was a potential obstacle to the career that I was aiming for, and that was the reason why I didn't tell my spiritual father about it. I knew he was going to give me all the reasons I needed to stop seeing her, and I wasn't ready to break up with my feelings for her once again. Sometime later, despite the fact that we knew my aspirations were not in favor of our relationship, we got into a relationship. We confessed our feelings for each other, and she admitted to me that she had been in love with me since university. It was completely new. I, who hoped one day to hear such a confession from her, she ended up admitting years later that she felt the same for me too. So we started seeing each other in secret, late at night after 9 p.m. prayers. We were living a fairy tale. What added spice to this budding relationship was the fact that we were almost obliged to live in secret. It was special. The more we saw each other, the more our feelings grew, and at the end, we ended up being intimate. I knew it was wrong, but it was at the same time so fulfilling. Deep inside, I asked myself the question whether my vocation was really intended for me. This question lingered for weeks and weeks in my head until Philippa told me she was pregnant. From there was born the trigger. I instantly knew that God had other plans for me. So I left the others. I immediately married the one who was going to be the mother of my child from now on. And from that day, I understood that God wanted me to be real with Him, clearly choosing my path.